You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. This social media clip, released 2016 by the World Economic Forum, is where that phrase all started. And it followed up with, whatever you'll want, you'll rent, and it'll be delivered by drone. Now, of course, this caused uproar, and the WF claim all they were doing was sharing 8 predictions for the world of 2030, which included a whole host of other predictions. I'll play the video that started this all at the end of this video. The WF have made clear since it does not have a stated goal to remove everyone's private property by 2030, but of course, who knows? And this video isn't about debating any of that. This video is really all about going through the data that proves how the death of the property owning middle class is unfolding in front of our eyes. In fact, the decline of owning assets, full stop. For instance, take a look at cars. Relative to earnings, more and more is being borrowed to buy new cars than ever before. Same for used cars, as you can see here. In 2010, 60% of new cars bought were financed. Now it's over 90%. Same with mobile phones. A decade ago, most people bought their phones outright. Now, about 75% of mobiles are tied into contracts, enabling you to spread the cost of a £1,000 plus phone over years. So we're told owning a home, owning assets, was the foundation of a good life, that if you worked hard and you then work and own a home, a car, a phone, build some wealth, and eventually, if you're lucky, retire in peace. But that dream, it's dying right now. Today, we are watching the collapse of the property owning middle class. And unless something changes, the future might look more along the lines of pre-war Britain than anything we're used to. Let me show you why. For the past 70 years in the UK, the US, and much of Europe and Australia, we've had something rare, a broad property owning middle class. And it wasn't always like this, and it's not like this in most of the world. In places like Latin America, South Africa, India, Russia, you have what economists call dual economies, a small, ultra-wealthy elite and a vast majority who own very little or nothing. That used to be us too. In the 18th century, most Brits rented. Property ownership was for the few. Just take a look at house prices as a multiple of average earnings on this graph. Over the 18th and early 19th century, now they sit about 8.3 times earnings, but back then it was almost 13 times average earnings. It was only after World War II, thanks to wage growth, council housing, and favourable mortgage terms, that a middle class was born. But what took 70 years to build might unravel in half that time. Now, there are 2 ways the middle class is dying. We are watching the middle class lose its assets and gain debt at scale. So, number 1, property ownership rates are collapsing among younger generations. In the early 2000s, over 59% of 25 to 34-year-olds owned their own home. Today, it's around 35%. But the inequality has grown. So those on lower incomes have seen home ownership reduce from 19% to 10%, a 47% decrease. The highest income portion have seen it still drop, but from 86% to 68%, a far smaller 21% drop. Number 2, the only way to own anything is with debt. Massive, burdensome debt. So for most buyers today, a mortgage isn't just a path to ownership, it's a lifelong financial prison. So you can see from this table that total average debt across mortgages, loans, etc. has grown from £164,000 to £211,000 from 2015 to 2024, an increase of 29%. Now bear in mind, over the same period, average earnings have only actually increased 5 to 6%. So where are all these assets going? Who owns the debt? Let's talk about how the rich are buying our assets. So where is all that property going? Well, of course, to the rich. They have so much surplus cash from global profits, rents and passive income, they can't spend it fast enough. So what do? They buy your house, they lend you money, they buy your government's debt. And that might feel fine at first. You see rising house prices, you then qualify for bigger and bigger mortgages. It feels like things are booming, but beneath the surface, it's in reality a one-way wealth pump. You sell your assets, they buy them. You borrow money, they collect the interest. You work harder, they get richer. We're moving from a nation of homeowners to a nation of permanent renters, not just on homes, but on cars, software, furniture, even clothes. So the phrase, "you will own nothing and you will be happy," it may not be the WF's stated goal, but certainly their prediction of the 2030 world is tracking on course. Let's talk about why ownership still matters and why it's being taken. A report titled "A Future with No Individual Ownership is Not a Happy One" argues that personal ownership isn't just about status, it's about autonomy, stability, well-being. When you take away ownership, you take away power. When people own their own homes, they plant roots, build families, create community. But when people rent, it's short-term, it's insecure, it's often overpriced. They live in constant stress. And that stress isn't evenly distributed. It's the working class, the young, the newly poor who are locked out of ownership, while the rich concentrate assets in fewer and fewer hands. And this isn't accidental, it's structural. So what happens when the middle class disappears? Well, without a middle class, what happens? You lose your consumer base, you lose your tax base, you lose your political centre, and you create a vacuum, one that's easily filled with extremism, instability, and populism. We've seen it before in pre-World War II Germany when the middle class was wiped out by hyperinflation. In Greece, after austerity gutted incomes and drove mass emigration. In Venezuela, where the collapse of oil revenue and runaway money printing destroyed the middle class entirely. Each of these collapses began economically but ended politically. So, is it too late? Right now, many of us are stuck. House prices are too high to buy, rents are too expensive to save, wages aren't rising quickly enough, and inflation is eating what little we have. Some say, well, just invest in property, gold, index funds, crypto. I'm a huge advocate of playing the same game, and if you can accumulate assets to protect yourself, you should. That's what the purpose of the channel is really about. But in reality, not all of us can do that. The UK still has millions of homeowners now, but that number is falling, and unless we change something from taxation to policy to regulation, we could be heading for a future where housing is owned by corporations, tenants have no leverage, and the very idea of owning a home feels like a historical blip. We could go back to the 18th century. This isn't fear-mongering, it's happening. The wealth of the working and middle class is being transferred upwards, asset by asset, house by house. And if we don't stop it, it'll get worse. You can see here in the 1900s, the bottom 50% owned 0.5% of the wealth, with the top 10% owning 92.7% of the wealth. So if you think things can't get worse, they can get worse, and by some margin. All you have to do is look back in time. In 2023, the richest 50 families in the UK held more wealth than half the UK population. If the wealth of the super rich continue at this rate, by 2035, the wealth of the richest 200 families will be larger than the whole UK GDP. You'll own nothing and someone else will be very happy. It's interesting that China's President Xi coined the phrase back in 2016 that houses are for living, not for speculation, which is a phrase that makes a lot of sense, like him or hate him, and he's since imposed a range of policies to undo a system that for them had bloated their property sector. So look, if you found this helpful, share it. Now let's watch that clip. WEF.